Case 4. Could Jesus sin? Could Jesus have really chosen to sin? Could the one Christians call the sinless Son of God have chosen disobedience? The answer to that question shapes how we understand his temptations, his humanity, his obedience, and even the gospel itself. Because if Christ could have fallen, then the certainty of our salvation would rest on a Savior who might have failed. Today, the case is before us. The charge is simple. Jesus could have sinned, and his temptations prove that moral failure was genuinely possible for the incarnate Son. But this claim must be tested carefully. Before we ask what Christ experienced, we must ask who Christ was. The one who stood in the wilderness was not merely a remarkable man trying to remain faithful. He was the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, fully divine and fully human. One person, two natures, without confusion, without division, without change. And this matters. Sin is not simply a bad decision made in a difficult moment. Sin is a moral defect, a turning of the will toward evil, a corruption within the person. But the Son of God possesses no corruption, no defect, and no inclination toward evil. Jesus did not and could not sin, because the person of the Son is holy, incorruptible, and without defect. So the real question is not whether Christ's human nature could be approached by temptation. Of course it could. Hunger was real. Pain was real. Suffering was real. Satan's enticements were real. The question is whether the person of the Son could morally fail. And the answer is no. Christ's temptations were external. He faced hunger in the wilderness. He faced suffering in a fallen world. He faced the direct assault of Satan himself. They were also genuine. Jesus did not pretend to be human. He entered fully into the weakness, sorrow, and hardship of human life, yet without sin. In him, there was no inward movement toward evil, no fallen nature, no divided will. His human will, as truly human, was never separated from the divine will of the Son, but freely and perfectly conformed to it in every act. This does not make Christ less human. It reveals what humanity was meant to be before sin entered the world. And there is another truth, often overlooked. Christ did not experience temptation less deeply because he never sinned. He experienced it more deeply. The person who gives in to temptation eventually escapes its pressure, but the person who never yields bears its full weight. Jesus never surrendered. He never compromised. He never bent beneath the burden. He endured temptation to the very end. And this is essential to the gospel. The world did not need another moral teacher. It needed a perfect representative. Adam stood in a garden and failed. Christ entered a fallen world and obeyed. Adam reached for what God had forbidden. Christ submitted to the Father's will, even when that obedience led to suffering, rejection, and the cross. His obedience was not fragile. It was not a narrow escape from failure. It was the holy obedience of the eternal Son, lived out in true human life. The early church understood this. The fathers called Christ the spotless Lamb, the Holy One, the righteous Son, and the one without sin. Not merely someone who happened to avoid sin, but the sinless Son of God, personally holy and incorruptible, tempted in every way, yet without sin. Not because the temptations were imaginary, but because the one being tempted is the eternal Son. So the verdict is clear. Jesus could not sin. His temptations were real. His humanity was true. His suffering was genuine. But his obedience was unwavering, because his person is the divine Son, and his human will is always perfectly united with the divine will in the mystery of the incarnation. The claim that Christ could have sinned is dismissed, and in its place stands the glory of the gospel, a Savior who was tested in every way, yet never failed, a perfect representative, a spotless Lamb, a faithful Son, and the only one qualified to save.